When I was a kid, we spent most of our time outside. There were no smartphones, no game consoles, no fancy distractions. On weekends, we watched some cartoons, but that was it. The rest of the time, we played outdoors. I remember one time, back in 5th grade, my parents got some vacation time, and we decided to visit my grandma in the village. I wasn't thrilled. All my friends were staying in the city, and I was being dragged to the middle of nowhere with no one to hang out with. Mom tried to cheer me up, saying we'd only be gone for 2 or 3 weeks, and that I'd surely meet kids my age there to play with. Yeah, right. Kids my age, in the middle of nowhere, I thought, sulking. I went outside to tell my friends the bad news. I met up with Alex and Chris, told them I'd be leaving for a while. They were bummed, but promised they'd wait for me. At some point, we started talking about ghosts and witches, stuff that supposedly lives in villages. I knew they were just trying to scare me, but it didn't matter. My parents had already decided everything for me. That day, Dad started the car, Mom packed the last suitcase, and I sat by the window, watching my friends fade into the distance with a heavy heart. The trip was long, about 6 hours, maybe more. I don't remember exactly. We arrived close to sunset. Grandma was happy to see us and immediately invited us to the table. I ate a little. She had cooked rabbit. I didn't like it much. I couldn't stop imagining a fluffy little bunny, and it killed my appetite. Exhausted from the trip, I went to bed early. My parents stayed up chatting. That night I woke up needing to pee. The bathroom, as expected, was outside. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't hold it. I put on my slippers and went into the yard. There was a light fog, and the moon was nowhere to be seen. As I stood in the outhouse, I suddenly heard a strange sound far off. It was hard to tell whether it was laughter or crying. I froze, listening. 5 minutes passed. Silence. But something about it sent chills down my spine. I remembered the ghost stories my friends told me before I left. Eventually, the noise faded. I stepped out, glanced around, but the fog was too thick to see anything. I bolted back to the house. It took me a while to calm down and fall asleep again. In the morning, I told my parents about it. Dad said the village was near the forest, and it was probably just a fox. They make weird noises sometimes. That explanation helped me relax, and I soon forgot all about it. The next day dragged on. My parents and Grandma were working in the garden, and I was told to go outside and play. I remember thinking, play with who? It's a village. But to my surprise, I quickly met 2 boys around my age, Michael and Nick. I was relieved. We hit it off right away and started hanging out. There wasn't much to do, so we made up our own fun. We decided to build a little fort from sticks and branches to play in when it rained. While building, we talked about where we were from. Turns out they were from the same city as me, but from some weird-sounding street. Gray or something like that. I didn't care. I finally had someone to play with. We got so into building the fort that we didn't notice it was getting dark. The boys said they had to head home, but I stayed behind to finish a few final touches. About 15 or 20 minutes later, I stuck in the last branch and stepped back, admiring the work. All done, I said to myself. Then I heard it again. That same strange sound, laughter and crying closer than before. The hair on my neck stood up. I tried to calm myself. "It's just a fox, remember?" I yelled into the dark. "Hey, fox, I'm not afraid of you. Come closer and I'll throw a rock at your head." Suddenly, the sound stopped. I looked around, trying to spot it. A cold wave of fear ran through my chest. I started slowly backing away toward the house. Then the sounds returned, louder, more distorted. My knees shook. I forced myself to turn and run. The laughter, the crying, it followed me, echoing through the trees. I glanced over my shoulder, convinced I'd see something chasing me. I grabbed a rock and hurled it into the bushes where the sound had come from. But there was nothing there. I ran all the way back home. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. I saw my parents and Grandma. They scolded me for staying out so late. I tried to tell them what happened, but they didn't believe me. Grandma, though, she looked at me strangely, shook her head, and said quietly, "They've come back again." The next morning, I met up with the boys again. They looked the same as the day before, except Nick had a bump on his forehead. I asked him what happened. He said he fell off a ladder. I didn't think much of it. We went back to the fort and decided to play war. I was defending the base while the others ran into the bushes to attack. Everything was fine until I started hearing that same laughter, or crying, coming from where Michael had gone. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I stared at the bush, waiting, and then something stepped out. It looked like Michael. Same body, same clothes. But his eyes were pure white, like he was blind, and his mouth wasn't a mouth. It was a snout, like a dog's or a wolf's, filled with sharp yellow teeth. He had no ears, just smooth skin. I stood there, paralyzed. He kept walking toward me. Then from another bush, a second creature appeared, identical. It sprinted toward me. In panic, I screamed, "No, don't!" To my shock, the first creature jumped at the second and started growling something I couldn't understand. The only words I could make out were, "Mine, mine." They both started making that horrifying sound again, the laughter, the crying, mixed together into something unnatural. That was it. I ran. I didn't look back. I just ran and ran. The sounds were behind me again, right on my heels. When I reached my street, I finally stopped and looked back. Nothing. No one followed me. I found my grandma and told her everything. She stared at me, her face cold and serious. "They're back again," she muttered. I didn't ask her what she meant. But not long after, she started telling my parents we should go home. They didn't understand why. But when they saw me crying and terrified, they packed up. From then on, we only visited for a couple of days every few weeks to help out with chores. Every time my parents went to the village, I stayed in the city. Either my godfather stayed with me or one of Mom's friends. I'm 34 now. Grandma's gone, and I never asked her who or what those things were. But when we went back to the village for her funeral, we heard that sound again. And this time, I wasn't the only one who heard it. It was a fine Sunday. My wife Nancy and I drove out to our summer cabin just outside of Glenfield. She spent time fussing over our grandson, Rusty, while I dug up a corner of the garden. The neighbors were already barbecuing. I caught the mouth-watering scent of salmon grilling over coals. And just over the fence, I heard the familiar shout, "Hey, Hank! Nancy! Come join us!" So we did. We drank vodka chilled in creek water and nibbled on gourmet fish. Somebody started singing old Union songs. We stayed until nightfall. Would have stayed longer, too, if Rusty hadn't started whining for his own bed. He never slept anywhere else. With a grunt, I heaved myself into the driver's seat. I'd always been on the hefty side, but after retirement, the weight piled on fast and messily. I lumbered around sweating and wheezing, cracking joints with each step. "Oof," I'd puff. "Sorry, my bad," I'd mutter. Always polite, always embarrassed. Driving under the influence? Look, Half a bottle? In my time, that wasn't even considered tipsy. Besides, every cop in town knew me. I was the former chief of the highway patrol. I retired with full honors, not an easy feat for a man in a job like mine. Folks respected me. At the farewell, they gifted me a painting by a local artist. Big canvas, 5 feet by 8. Title, Didn't Make the Turn. It depicted a steep country road bending sharply downhill. A semi had barely avoided careening into a ditch. The trailer still hung dangerously off the edge. 2 truckers stood nearby, hands on hips, scratching their heads. Even their broad, dumbstruck backs seemed to ask, "How the hell did this happen?" In the foreground, a bent old woman peeked from behind a fence, clutching a walking stick. Her shack leaned into the hillside like it was giving up on standing. The wheel of the truck loomed next to her garden patch, just a few feet away. 1 more meter and the poor woman would have been a smear on the soil. The artist painted everything in meticulous detail. Crooked pickets, limp cabbage heads, wilted potato vines. It was vivid, almost too real. I hung it right across from the home theater. Guests always paused to admire it. "Strong work," they'd say, swaying their heads side to side like roosters. We made it back to town in one breath. There was only one tricky turn on the way, a spot that had taken out more than a few hot shots. But for a guy like me, piece of cake. Outside our building, I saw a cab idling. That was Roger, the upstairs neighbor, a part-time cabbie and full-time sleeper. The guy was passed out cold, mouth hanging open like a baby bird, one leg still hanging out of the car. The radio crackled. "Car 7? Where are you, 7? The table at the wake looked like a potluck at the end of the world. Everyone brought whatever they had: pies in greasy paper, pickled herring, boiled potatoes, cabbage in mismatched bowls. Amongst 3-liter jugs of cloudy moonshine stood elegant crystal bottles. It was a collision of classes, disposable cups beside fine stemware, plastic forks clinking against silver. Despite the sadness, there was laughter and toasts and singing. Within reason, of course. It was a funeral, after all. Still, the room would go silent the moment someone raised their voice or tapped their glass with a fork, even if the speaker was just a punk girl in leather and a bandana. "She even old enough for this party?" I whispered to my neighbor. "She's got ID," the girl shouted. "I had my party too for my 18ing, and some smart-ass uncle just like you," she glared at me, stands up and says, "To our sweet little flower, may you always stay 18. Guess what? Wish granted. She died in a motorcycle crash that very night. Now she'll always be 18. She sat back down, eyes glassy, lip trembling. We were quiet for a bit. Then someone popped a cork, and the chatter resumed. A man in a tracksuit started talking about tomatoes. "So my neighbors head out to town on a hot morning. We're talking 120 in the greenhouse. Halfway there, they panic. The tomatoes, not aired out. Husband says, 'Let's turn back.' Wife says, 'It's bad luck.' He's distracted. Drives through a red light. Boom, dead. Him and a pedestrian. She's fine, not even a scratch. Bet she ran home, opened the greenhouse, then called the funeral home." Everyone sighed and drank silently. "Listen to women," he muttered. "Bringers of bad omens." Then a classy-looking lady spoke up. "My friend was warned. A gypsy and a psychic told her, 'Beware of a big striped insect,' and guess what?" Everyone froze. She and her husband were driving home from a party. Suddenly she screamed, scared him half to death. He jerked the wheel, flipped the car. She died instantly. Later he found the wasp in the back seat. People nodded approvingly. A blonde, right out of a movie, tossed her hair. "Honestly," she said, "they were lucky. Quick deaths. Car crash, that's dramatic. Glamorous even. Beats swine flu, doesn't it?" She leaned in, dreamy. Imagine being a beauty and then, bam, icicle to the skull. People laugh first, then mourn. You become a joke. The icicle girl. Or swine flu face. But a car crash? That's tragedy? She got applause, but then a woman in a headscarf tugged my sleeve. You think my little Cody didn't feel much pain? It was winter. He was bundled up, undershirt, flannel, sweater with a bunny, knit vest, puffy coat. Surely that helped? She looked so fragile, her voice, so hopeful. I couldn't answer. The blonde leaned in, annoyed. Lady, come on, slam your finger in a door. Once bare, once wrapped. Big difference, right? So we wrapped the woman's finger with tissues and skirt fabric and shut it gently in the door a few times. See? No pain, she smiled, holding her finger aloft like a relic. But minutes later, she was back at it. He had a sweater with a bunny and a vest, and I remembered then. Cody died when a Jeep backed over him on the playground. His mom, too. Both gone. I shivered. The party kept rolling. Wine flowed. Voices grew louder. Laughter rang out. But something in me stayed cold. Sweetheart, said the man with the scar to the biker girl. You're drinking like it's your 18th again. 18 years old, she belted out. The crowd joined in, swaying, arms around shoulders. 18. Ah, a wasp, shrieked the lady from before. Just a fly, someone assured her. No, think about it, said the tomato guy. His wife? Not a scratch. Calm down, others said. We're not alive anymore. That's exactly why I can freak out, someone retorted. What do I care now? I slipped away under cover of the noise and staggered home, wheezing, knees cracking. At home, I crawled into bed beside Nancy and passed out. Next morning, Nancy noticed my mood. What's wrong, Hank? You hear about Roger upstairs? Killed in a wreck. We told him not to drive like a maniac. By noon, she was dressing up in her best. What do you mean? Where? To the party. I ironed your white shirt, prepped your black suit. Now go shower. I let her wash me, dress me like a doll. The sun was setting. We stepped outside. I still hoped we were heading away from the junkyard. Wait, she said, turning toward the daycare. I need to get Rusty. Number, please God, no. I leaned against the playground fence and cried. Cried for the people who play with cars and lives like toys. Cried for a country where the dead party like they're alive and the living stumble around like corpses. But children? Why the children? When Nancy came back, out of breath, carrying Rusty, I was calm. I took him in my arms, kissed his cold cheek, and carried him toward the wagon, its windows glowing warmly. Hank! Where are you going? Nancy shouted. Are you insane? We're heading to the Kestersons' anniversary. I stopped in the middle of the street, wiped my brow, and followed her with slow, uncertain steps. To the Kestersons, for their party. Strigoi, a memory I'll never forget. There are things we humans often choose not to speak about, sometimes to protect others, sometimes because we don't want to be labeled insane. And though my grandfather is no longer alive, I'll never forget the story I found in his old journal. West Virginia, December 1945. Our small recon squad, 8 soldiers in total, including 2 snipers, was being transported in an unmarked army truck through the Appalachian region. One of those snipers was me. My name is Eli Morrow. Strange name for an American soldier of that era, right? But everyone in my unit just called me Ike. I never thought much about my roots. I grew up in an orphanage and enlisted voluntarily at 16. 2 years later, I was the youngest sniper in our division. I'll spare you the details of my early life. What matters is what happened next. Rumors were spreading that Berlin was cracking and that the fascist regime was on its last legs. Our mission was relatively simple. Intelligence had suggested that rogue German units might be regrouping deep in the Appalachian forests, trying to establish a hidden post. We were to monitor the situation for a week. By late afternoon, we had arrived near a town just outside of Braxton County, a small hidden mountain village, name long forgotten, that was home mostly to Romani families. It was immediately clear they didn't welcome us. Fear lingered in their eyes. Still, to our surprise, two elders spoke broken English, and we managed to communicate. They warned us. The forest did not take kindly to outsiders. Spirits lingered. Warnings we, of course, ignored. The first 4 days passed without much trouble. We secured high ground and watched for enemy movement. But even in stillness, I felt eyes on me. Retsov, our second sniper, said the same. "These woods ain't right, Ike." On the 5th day, we made a horrifying discovery. A German encampment, or rather what was left of it, limbs and entrails scattered everywhere. The commander claimed it was the work of wolves, but no wolf does that, and surely no wolf could have done it so silently. This place was just a mile from us. The force that tore those men apart. It was beyond human. We returned to the village. The elders begged us to leave, said we had disturbed the true rulers of the forest. We didn't listen. Just 3 more days and we'd be out of there. That night we lost Grissom and Retsov. They went out for a quick recon and vanished. Matthews and Dunn followed their trail, gone too. Now there were 4 of us left. Captain Victor Connors forbade us from stepping beyond the village after dusk. Meanwhile, the villagers transformed. Where once children played in the streets, now shutters slammed shut at sunset. The 2 English-speaking elders warned us, "They're not coming back." None of them. I broke protocol that night during my watch. As I patrolled past the village square, I ran into one of the elders. He must have known where I was headed. "If you see your friends in those woods," he said, "run. They are not your friends anymore." I brushed him off. Paranoia, I thought. As I neared the tree line, I saw Matthews. He smiled, but something about him was wrong. "Eli, thank God. We've been waiting for you," he called out. "Where have you been?" I asked. "Did you find Grissom and Retsov?" "Sure. Come on. We're all nearby. We were just talking about you." Something twisted in my gut. A voice in my head screamed the old man's warning, and then it hit me. Matthews never called me by my last name. He wasn't the kind of guy who smiled like that. And his eyes, they were dead. His teeth, black and sharp. I raised my rifle. "I'm not going with you," I told him. "Why not?" "Because you're not Matthews." He smiled wider. His eyes turned pale white, like a corpse. "Then these trees," he hissed, "will be witnesses to your death." His body began to twist, stretch unnaturally, skin turning pitch black. Claws replaced his fingers. Fangs grew from his jaw. I didn't wait. I ran. Behind me, I heard the snarls, the pounding of feet. No longer human, not even animal. Just monsters. As I sprinted toward the light of the village, I realized I was being hunted by 4 of them. 4 soldiers I once called brothers. I made it back and woke Captain Connors and the remaining 2 men. They laughed at first, until they saw my face, and then, slowly, the laughter stopped. Because they saw them too. Dozens, maybe 50 or more, dark figures surrounded our camp, standing silently beyond the firelight. In the center stood something that wore Matthews's shape, that same smile, that same horror. A cry came from behind us, one of the old Romani men. "Come! My house! Now!" he yelled. We dashed inside. The whispers started as soon as the door closed, tempting, pleading, echoing from all sides. "Come outside! We just want to talk!" But the old man told us to pray and not believe their words. We held our ground. We clutched our crosses. We heard women and children sobbing and whispering in their cellars, and for an hour we sat there, waiting for the sun. When dawn finally broke, the monsters disappeared. We left the village that very morning. We made a pact never to speak of what we saw. We blamed the deaths on wolves. When asked later what happened, the old Romani man whispered just one word: strigoi. In Romanian folklore, it means vampire, or something even darker. To this day, I just hope that village no longer exists, and that whatever was out there never returns.